Okay, so what if I told you that Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac? What if it was never really about Isaac?
Hmm. It's quite a hook. It's definitely a story that, well, has puzzled people, hasn't it? Raised so many questions for millennia.
It really has. And today we're doing a deep dive into some really interesting source material on this. It's from Abraham's Test, The Heart of Surrender. The author, Vic Waryuko, actually holds a doctorate in theology.
Right, so a scholarly perspective.
Exactly. And our mission here is to unpack what this source argues. What did the test truly mean? Its significance in maybe the bigger picture.
And what it means for us today for faith and trust.
Yeah, precisely. Surrendered to. We want to help you look at this maybe familiar story with some fresh eyes, pull out the key ideas from this text.
It's a tough starting point, though. I mean, taken at face value, it's hard to reconcile, isn't it? Why would God ask for something that seems so brutal, so contradictory to his nature?
Them-
And the source dives right into that, pointing to Genesis 22, verses 1 and 2, where God tells Abraham, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and sacrifice him. It feels extreme.
It absolutely does. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of get stuck. But the source immediately zeroes in on a really critical detail right there in the first verse.
What's that?
It says, God tested Abraham.
Ah, okay. So the framing is crucial from the outset.
Yes. The argument isn't that God suddenly approved of child sacrifice, but that the command itself, well, it was presented and intended as a test.
That really shifts things. So the source suggests the test wasn't actually designed to, end with Isaac's death.
That's the core idea. It was about Abraham's heart, and specifically what Isaac represented to Abraham.
Okay, so more than just his son.
Much more. Isaac was the living proof of God's promise, wasn't he? The one Abraham waited decades for. He represented the future, the covenant, basically everything.
Everything you'd hoped for.
Exactly. So the test wasn't really about the act, maybe, but the attachment.
That's a good way to put it. The source frames God's underlying question beautifully, I think. It's like God was asking, do you trust me more than this amazing blessing I gave you?
Wow.
And it highlights how easily we humans can, elevate the gift. Could be a job, a relationship, a dream, whatever, above the giver.
That really changes the perspective, doesn't it? Less about a harsh command, more about revealing where Abraham's ultimate devotion really lay.
Precisely. The source really emphasizes that God was looking at the inner reality, Abraham's obedience, his willingness to surrender everything, and his faith.
Yeah.
It points straight to Hebrews 11:17. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. His faith wasn't just mental agreement. It was shown by his actions, right? By actually taking the steps God asked.
And that faith, it must have been just extraordinary because the source highlights that statement Abraham makes to his servants. It's almost unbelievable when you think about it. Genesis 22:5, he says, we will worship and we will come back.
Ah, yes, we will come back.
Think about that. He's going up the mountain, seemingly, to sacrifice his only son, yet he tells his companions they both will return.
It's such a profound declaration of trust, isn't it? The source really captures that. Abraham clearly believed God would either provide a substitute or even resurrect Isaac if necessary. He had to fulfill the promise. Abraham's faith was ultimately in God's ability to keep his word, even when things looked completely impossible.
Okay, so this is where the interpretation starts to broaden out even more. The source argues this story isn't just like a personal account of one man's faith.
No, it's also seen as a powerful prophetic picture.
A prophetic picture. Tell me more about that.
Yes, this is a really central theme in the source material. It draws these really striking parallels between Isaac and Jesus.
For example.
Well, think about Isaac carrying the wood for the sacrifice on his back,
Okay.
just like Jesus carried the cross. And the source contrasts Abraham being about to give his son.
But stopping.
Right, but God actually giving his son. It references Romans 8:32. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all.
And the location itself, Mount Moriah, the source notes that too, right?
It does. Mount Moriah, where this test happened, is widely believed to be the same geographical area, the same region where Jesus was crucified centuries later.
So the connection is layered. Personal test, prophetic location.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how the source kind of wraps this up. It concludes that Abraham's ordeal wasn't just a test for him, but it was a dramatic illustration pointing towards God's ultimate provision.
Provision for everyone.
For all of humanity, yeah. It foreshadows the coming of the true sacrifice.
Which links directly to the name Abraham gives the place right after.
Jehovah Jireh.
The Lord will provide.
Yeah.
This is 22.14.
Precisely. And that ram, the one caught in the thicket, that becomes a huge symbol within this interpretation.
How so?
The source presents it as this crystal clear picture of substitutionary sacrifice, an innocent life taking the place of the one originally intended for sacrifice.
It's a substitute.
It's seen as a direct preview of Jesus, who John the Baptist later calls the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world.
John 1:29.
Right. So the core message coming out of this source is God didn't just ask for a sacrifice. Ultimately, he became the sacrifice humanity needed.
Wow, that really does transform how you look at the whole event. Okay, so how does this ancient story, seen through this lens, speak to us now, today?
Well, the source brings it right into the present.
Yeah.
It suggests God is essentially still asking us the same fundamental question.
Which is?
Do you trust me, even with what you love the most? It sort of pushes us to identify our own Isaac.
And when the source says you're Isaac, it doesn't just mean like a person, does it?
Oh, not at all. It could be literally anything we hold incredibly dear, anything that feels essential to us or defines us.
Like a career?
Could be a career, yeah. Or a specific relationship, a dream you've held on to forever, your financial security. Maybe even something difficult, like a habit or a way of coping that you rely on, even if it's not healthy.
So whatever has become the most significant thing in our lives, maybe besides God himself.
That's the idea. Whatever sits on the throne of your heart, so to speak.
And the source points to that crucial moment, Genesis 22:12, when the angel calls out, "Do not lay a hand on the boy." Why then? Why did God stop Abraham right at that exact moment?
According to this source, it was because Abraham had proven his heart
Ow!
through his actions. By going through with it, right up to the final second, he showed God that nothing, not even Isaac, the son of the promise, was more important than his obedience and his trust in God.
So it wasn't about God wanting Isaac.
No, it was about God seeing where Abraham's ultimate trust really was.
So the sacrifice then, it wasn't about God taking something away.
Not primarily, no. It was about receiving Abraham's heart.
The source argues God doesn't ask us to surrender things because he wants to, like, diminish our lives or take away good things.
Exactly. He asks because he wants our hearts fully turned towards him. That's the prize he's after.
That completely reframes surrender. So it's not about loss. It's about proving trust
Right. Well,
and making space for something else.
yes, making space for something greater. The perspective in this source is that genuine surrender, when it comes from trust, isn't the end of something good. It's the act of proving you trust God with that good thing, maybe even more than that good thing.
Okay.
And in doing that, you often discover that God has already provided, or he will provide, something perfectly suited, often something maybe beyond what you could have asked for or imagined. Every step of surrender seen this way is actually a step towards finding God's provision.
Okay, so let's try and sum up this deep dive then. Based on the source material, what are the key takeaways, the main lessons for someone on their own faith journey today?
Well, the source really distills a few key points. First, and we touched on this right at the start, God's intention was never Isaac's death. The purpose was testing Abraham's heart, his trust.
Right. And flowing directly from that, the second point is that surrender, when it's rooted in that trust, actually leads to provision.
Yeah, giving God your Isaac, whatever that is for you, it opens the door to receive more. It's not loss, it's gain, ultimately.
Okay, third.
Third, the source suggests that God's plans often have this prophetic dimension. The difficult trials you might face, they might not just be personal struggles. They could potentially be part of a bigger redemptive story God is writing.
That's a big thought. And finally,
Finally, it just underscores that real trust isn't just, believing something in your head. It's shown through obedience. Faith, in this view, is belief matched with action.
belief paired with action. Got it.
And the source wraps this up with some powerful encouragement. It says, basically, if you feel like God is asking you to surrender something significant right now, remember that name,
Jehovah Jireh.
the God who provides. Abraham's story is presented as this timeless reminder that he does provide.
And it's helpful, too, I think, that the source itself includes prompts for personal reflection. It really encourages you, the listener, to think about what might God be inviting you to trust him with today.
Absolutely. It makes it immediate personal, not just an ancient story.
Yeah, less about a distant historical event, much more about a living principle of faith.
Exactly.
So this deep dive into Abraham's test, the heart of surrender, really gives us a compelling way to reframe this foundational story, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
It shifts the focus from what seems like a really difficult command to a profound test of trust, a call to total surrender. And ultimately, it reveals God's character as the provider.
Yeah, it invites us to look maybe beneath the challenging surface of the story and see the deeper heart of God and the kind of faith he's looking for.
So, as you think about this story after our conversation, maybe ponder what that Isaac might represent in your own life right now and consider the source's idea that giving God your whole heart, trusting Him with everything, it isn't really about losing what you cherish. It might just be about opening the door to receive far more than you could ever imagine.